Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, convener.
Okay, thank you very much. On behalf of my deputy convener, Councillor Kelly, and myself, I'd like to welcome you all to this planning committee. And the above is to be held remotely in accordance with Section 43 of the Local Government in Scotland Act 2003. It's been directed that this meeting will be conducted in such a manner as to allow remote attendance by elected members. The meeting will also be live streamed. So we'll go straight to the business and ask if there is any apologies.
Thank you, convener. We have apologies submitted by Councillor Colley.
Okay, thank you very much. That takes us to declaration of interest, and just for clarity, I'll read this out. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Have we any declarations of interest at this time? None intimated, thank you. That takes us to item 3 on your agenda, which is the minute. The minute of meeting of the Planning Committee held on the 21st of September 2022, and it's pages 4 to 18 on your agenda papers. Any questions arising for the minute? Can we agree the minute? Agreed, thank you very much. Before we go into item 4, we'll just say at this stage that I'm going to bring forward Mr Dryden to discuss an issue relating to item 9 on the agenda. Mr Dryden.
Thank you, convener, for allowing me in this early opportunity. This matter concerns item 9 on your agenda, which is the application for the construction of 229 dwelling houses at Caulfield Road in Bo'ness. And in light of the ongoing discussions with the application and the calling reasons that it covers drainage, there has been extensive consultation discussion with regard to the issue of flooding, and very recently our flooding consultants in the last round of comments raised a capacity issue or a query in relation to an existing field drain that exists on the site. While there has been extensive discussions to address the issue of drainage, there remains a question mark query in relation to the proposal to culvert that drain and the water course, and this is also needs to be assessed against SEPA guidance, which covers the kind of principle of not covering the culverted water courses. So in light of that matter being raised and ongoing, convener, and also the fact that we have a planning committee due to be held 3 weeks tomorrow on the 16th of November, it is recommended that we seek continuation of this application that was due to be heard this morning to allow officers to finalise this issue and to bring an updated report back to committee on the 16th of November. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr Dryden. Considering what Mr Dryden says, I'm quite happy to move continuation. Does other members feel? Agreed. Agreed. Continue. Thank you very much. Now, before we go into item 4, just take an opportunity at this time just to ask if any members would like to move a site visit for any of the items on the agenda that we're continuing with. Is there anybody at this stage minded to move for sites? Happy just to go through with the agenda. Okay, thank you. Right, that takes us to item 4, which is the mixed use development, including residential, employment, commercial and retail use, open space and landscaping with associated infrastructure at land to the east of Gilston Farm, Gilston Crescent, Pullman for Hanstein Limited. It's pages 19 to 107 on your agenda, and the report is going to be by Mr Brent Vivian, but just to state that we have an application that has been made by Mr Ian Hyde, the agent, and Mr Ian Conway to be received as a deputation to be heard in respect of the item of business. So before we hear the report, are members agreed to the deputation being heard? Agreed to that? Okay, fine. Thank you. Okay, Mr Vivian, just take it away. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, convener. This application is a major development and seeks planning permission in principle for a mixed-use development, including residential, employment, commercial and retail uses. The principal elements of the proposed development are residential land for approximately 500 dwellings, 25% of which would be affordable. A mixed-use area for employment, retail, commercial and community uses, and a new neighbourhood centre. A major new area of connected open spaces and a wetland, linked by green corridors and active travel routes. Areas for recreation and sports. Transportation related works, including a new roundabout on Gilston Crescent, provision of a bus route through the site, and off-site road improvement works, and associated SUDS, landscaping and engineering works. The site lies within the urban limits under the Local Development Plan 2 and is identified as a mixed-use opportunity, being a major area of change and Gilston's strategic growth area and part of the Eastern Gateway strategic business location, and a site identified as a significant contributing site to meeting the Council's housing land requirement. And the site is estimated in the Council's latest housing land audit to start delivering houses in 2024 to 25 towards meeting the housing land requirement. Development guidance for the major area of change is set out in the Local Development Plan. The application is supported by a development framework to guide the detailed planning of the site going forward. Jack, can I ask you to bring up some of the documents for viewing? If you could go to the location plan on page 7 of the development framework. Yeah, page 7, thanks. I don't know whether you can make that a little bit larger, the location plan on that page. Anyway, the idea of sharing that plan is just to remind members of the location of the site. You can see from the plan the site lies immediately to the east of the existing settlement area of Polmont. It is constrained in other directions by the A803 to the north, the A801 to the east, and the Glasgow-Edinburgh main railway line to the south. You can also make out Gilston Burn, which crosses through the site in a southeast to northwest direction, and running parallel to the A801 within the site is the northern section of Nicolton Road. Jack, if you could scroll down to page 9 of that document to the parameters plan, that's it. This plan sets out the key principles and informs the indicative master plan prepared for the site. There's a series of numbers on this plan. Number 1 indicates the primary access, which is at the existing roundabout entrance on the A803. Number 2 is the proposed secondary access on Gilston Crescent. The heavy black dashed line between the two entrance points is the indicative primary street and bus route. Purple area in the northeast corner is the proposed mixed use area. The light brown areas are the proposed housing areas, and the green areas are the open space areas incorporating drainage infrastructure. Thanks, Jack. The application was originally considered by the committee on 16th of February 2022, when it was agreed to continue the application to allow the committee to carry out a site visit to view the physical characteristics of the site. That site visit took place on 28th of February 2022. The application was considered further by the committee on the 21st of September 2022. The report to that committee summarised a range of matters that were raised by committee at the site visit on 28 February 2022, provided further information in relation to those matters, and explained that due to ongoing consideration of those matters, it had not been possible to report the application to committee prior to the local government elections held on 5th of May 2022. At the meeting on 21 September 2022, the committee agreed to continue the application to allow the committee to carry out a further site visit to view the physical characteristics of the site. This would allow new committee members to acquaint themselves with the site, accompanied by council officers. That further site visit took place on 3rd of October 2022. Since the report was prepared for the meeting on 21 September 2022, a letter has been received from Carla Homes West Limited affirming that they have secured a position to purchase the whole site and they are committed to taking development of the site forward. The original report to committee set out the site planning history, the consultation responses, the matters raised in the public representations, and an assessment of the proposed development against the relevant policies of the local development plan, and recommended that the committee indicate that it is minded to grant planning permission in principle subject to the satisfactory completion of a Section 75 planning obligation. Just to advise members that a written representation was received from, this is yesterday evening, from local councillor Hannah. So I'll just advise you of the contents of that written representation. She has raised concerns, or sorry, she has had concerns raised with her, both by people in her constituency opposed to the development and those in favour of it, and she shares those concerns. She has concerns that there are a significant number of development contributions mentioned in the report, but there are no figures specified for the Fallon roundabout contribution, the healthcare contribution, the public transport contribution, or the active travel contribution. She also has concerns that the specified education contributions would be nowhere near enough, and that the affordable housing requirement should be more than 25%. She also considers that both a healthcare contribution and land within the site for a new healthcare facility should be sought. It is considered that no new matters have been raised that would alter the original recommendation from minded to grant decision. Previous recommendation is therefore reiterated, subject to an adjustment to the terms of the Section 75 planning obligation relating to the education contributions to reflect current indexation rates. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mr. Vivian. You'll probably realise that there will be a number of questions coming from members to your good self once we hear the application for the deputation request. So it's Mr. Hind and Mr. Conway. You'll have 10 minutes, sir. Whoever's going to be speaking, if you could maybe introduce yourself, tell us what your designation is, and then carry on.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving us, excuse me this moment. Thank you for giving us the time and opportunity to speak today. I'll just put up a presentation that I'll give with you and then I'll start.
And who can you introduce yourself, because and what your designation is? Thank you.
Certainly. I'm a planning associate and consultant at Barton Wilmore now Stantec. I'm the agent that's been working with the applicant Hanstein Land through this application. So I'll be speaking on behalf of Hanstein today, and I've also got a representative from Calla with me as well.
Thank you.
Right, can you all see start the presentation up okay?
Yep.
Great, right, I'll begin. Yeah, as I highlighted, I'm an agent that's working with Barton Wilmore. I've been working with Hanstein throughout to manage the planning application process for Gilston Park. As applicants, Hanstein have been working with the council for some time to deliver the aspirations of this allocated growth area. The planning permission in principle that you're considering today looks to update elements of the key principles set out by the council's LDP allocation to ensure that the scale and ambition of the development is deliverable. We have made a significant investment in preparing detailed studies, surveys and investigations that underpin the master plan-led approach we have taken. A development framework document has also been prepared to inform detailed planning applications in the future. This work has resulted in the application being supported by the Planning Service and all statutory consultees. Since this application was heard at committee in February, Hansteen has been working behind the scenes to secure a development partner. This has resulted in one of the most respected home builders and developers in the country, Cala Homes, being attracted and secured to deliver this new neighbourhood. Rather than me trying to convey Cala's thoughts on this, I'd like to briefly hand you over to them to tell you themselves.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ian Conway. I'm the Strategic Projects Director for Cala Homes West. Cala are delighted to be purchasing Gilston Park and to have the opportunity to work with Falkirk Council again to deliver the aspirations of your adopted local development plan. Cala Homes have been present in Falkirk for over 10 years as lead developer in the successful delivery of the Kinnaird Village growth area in Larbert, where we built and sold 711 homes ranging from 1 to 5 bed homes and meeting demand from buyers ranging from 18 to over 70 years old. The last Cala home at Kinnaird Village was sold recently, and Cala have been seeking opportunities to retain our presence in Falkirk. A high quality environment that will be delivered through the planning permission in principle you're considering today has given Cala the confidence that Gilston Park is that opportunity. Cala has a commitment to run our business in a responsible and sustainable way and to empower employees to deliver sustainable communities and homes. The location of the site within a progressive council and the principles of placemaking, active travel, sustainability and biodiversity that are at the heart of the Gilston Master Plan attracted Cala to this site. We're currently developing a new sustainable house type range that will be built at Gilston, removing the need for gas through the use of PV air source heat pumps, along with other technologies. The new range is our next step on our journey to achieving operational carbon-free homes by 2030. One of the important aspects of Gilston is the central parkland. It's a priority for Cala to deliver an attractive environment for the community. Detailed designs for this area, including the wetlands, recreation, active travel routes and biodiversity enhancements, will be developed in consultation with the council. Cala secured investment funds of over £130 million required to deliver the master plan aspirations through the delivery of 125 affordable homes, 375 private homes and employment generating uses envisaged. We're currently in discussion with a developer who is interested in employment generating land as a result of Cala being the developer and certainty that would come from the timescale should you approve today. The development will not only deliver much needed homes within an attractive environment, it will also deliver economic benefits through supporting 150 construction jobs for every year of construction, and with employment generating land supporting around 300 full-time jobs once completed. Should you be minded to approve the application today, we expect to commence development in late 2023 and to be welcoming new homeowners in both affordable and private homes in early 2025. We're looking forward to working with the council again to realise aspirations of Gilston Park and your LDP, and I'll now pass you back to Ian, who will provide you more detail on the application itself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Ian. The application site, as you heard from Brent, is allocated in the council's adopted local development plan as a mixed-use development for 500 homes and employment generating uses. The proposed development will meet the allocation parameters by providing the 500 new homes, including the affordable housing, as well as 4 hectares of business and commercial land, a neighbourhood centre with local retail as part of that, and a linked network of parklands and open spaces at the heart of the site. The design strategy we've followed has updated the LDP's development brief with a focus on environmental improvements, quality, accessibility and integration with Polmont. Our flood risk mitigation strategy has been used as an opportunity for an attractive central parkland area at the heart of the site, which delivers recreation opportunities and biodiversity enhancement opportunities. The overall provision of parkland constitutes over 50% of the development site and will be a multifunctional space that will include informal play, recreation, biodiverse planting and a focus on Gilston Farm. This design approach has been supported by the Planning Service and SEPA, with further engagement to be undertaken to inform the detailed design. The proposal will deliver a substantial area of 4 hectares for employment generating land. This fully meets the council's limitations of 2.5 hectares, which is set out in its latest employment land audit. The proposal will deliver 2.5 hectares specifically for light industrial land, which is covered by planning use classes 4 and 5, with the further 1.5 for retail and neighbourhood centre and commercial uses. This may include land for a health centre if required by the NHS. We have undertaken a comprehensive consultation process to garner feedback and shape our proposal. This featured a public consultation website and a live question and answer session, as well as lots of discussion with planning officers. A main message from public feedback was that local people wanted confidence that the new development could be successfully delivered and integrated into Polmont with limited impact on the quality and availability of local services. As the site is allocated in the LDP, the Council has already considered that local infrastructure is capable of improvement or delivery to serve the scale of the proposal. In the formal consultation responses, all Council departments agreed that any impact can be mitigated through appropriate developer contributions. Overall, we have agreed an £8 million package of developer contributions, the main elements of these being for education, financial contributions to local non-denominational primary, the secondary school and nursery. For healthcare, a financial contribution set out by the NHS with potential for discussion on land to be provided to accommodate a healthcare facility. Affordable housing will be delivered on site in line with the council requirements and percentage, and that will be done in partnership with the council or their nominated housing association. For roads and transport, we've looked at all the local junctions, and there'll be an upgrade of 3 local junctions as well as a contribution to the Lithallan interchange improvements. And there'll also be an extension to bus service F25 to go into the site and contributions to support a new service that will link to Polmont train station. The approval of this application and the resulting investment by CALA will be a key part to ensuring that these overarching improvements to the local area can be delivered in good time. We have set out an outline programme here, demonstrating that CALA is programming the first families moving to Gilston Park by around February 2025. Following approval of the PPP, CALA will seek partnership working with all council departments and help ensure that the stage of detail applications is delivered smoothly. The application delivers the council's aspirations for its allocated growth area and will deliver a significant proportion of the council's effective housing land supply. It is supported by the planning service with the recommendation for approval and is now has the certainty of delivery through CALA. We look forward to working with Falkirk Council and the local community to deliver a modern, sustainable and accessible community. We hope that you agree and will support and approve this proposal. Finally, just thank you for your time, and we're happy to accept any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, for your presentation, both of you. It's an opportunity now for members to ask questions of both Mr. Hind and Mr. Conway, and also we have our planning officer, Mr. Vivian, on standby as well. So, who would like to open up with questions? Yep, Councillor Forrest.
Thank you. Could you tell us a little bit more about the ratio of houses to flats, the size of the flats involved, and how many stories they're going to be, the types of houses that are actually going to be, are the 125 affordable houses, accommodation, going to be flats, or are they a mixture of flats and houses, or is that still up for grabs with the local authority? And you say that the contribution of a healthcare facility, if sought by the NHS Forth Valley, what happens if they don't actually want to have it in that area? Is there a financial contribution instead? I've got a few others, but I'll let you get on with that.
We'll start with that. Mr. Hind, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, please. I'll actually get Ian Conway from Cala will
Yeah.
address this.
At the moment, thanks for the question. At the moment, the application is a plan of permission in principle, so there's no detail in terms of the nature of housing included within this application. However, to answer your question in the stages, for the affordable housing, that's the next stage of discussion for us with your housing colleagues with regards to the appropriate provider of the affordable housing and the nature scale of it. We do envisage it would be a mix between homes and flats. However, that's the next stage of detail and that would be subject to a separate application. In terms of the Cala mix itself, you'll have seen, I mentioned our site previously at Pullman. Sorry, this is the site we're talking about just now, our site at Larbert. It'd be a similar mix to that, from 2-bed homes to 5-bed homes running through. I'm not sure if any of you have been recently to our last two phases within Larbert. You can see that mix working quite nicely there. We do have 4-storey flats in there. There's a possibility, depending on market conditions at the time, what would be appropriate. There is a unit restriction here of circa 500 units, so that manages the numbers which are there. But the scale, 2 to 5 bed for Cala in terms of the private homes, and the affordable is part of the discussion, but we expect it to be some homes and flats as well. The other question there, if you're satisfied with that, in terms of development contributions with the healthcare facility, we'll have discussions with NHS Forth Valley and the council. If they're not looking to locate premises within the neighbourhood centre, there is a development contribution which is managed through, I think it's your SG13 development contributions that would be made in lieu of provision of the land. But again, that's subject to timing and delivery and discussion at the next stages when the detail starts to come through. Does that satisfy you? Do you need some more?
That's fine for that, thank you. Is that okay to continue? Yeah. We all know Cala's reputation as a house builder. I've never heard anything about you delivering shops, small industrial units, neighbourhood centres, etc. I take it that would be subcontracted down to another builder. And also the non-residential units, such as the industrial, are these dependent on stages of the residential units being completed? And at what stage will the whole thing be completed?
Okay, so if I go, if you're okay with me answering that as well, if we go back to Cala delivering shops and the non-residential uses, we have done that in the past. It depends on the scale of the development which is there. In this instance, our intention is to bring on a development partner. We've already been approached by one once they were made aware that Cala are involved to deliver here. So in this one, we are intending bringing a partner in. We can't say names at the moment because we're not through this stage of it. In terms of the delivery in relation to unit numbers, that's not part of this application or the recommendation from the council. On this site specifically, the possibility or probability of the delivery of the commercial units is really linked to us getting on and making our investment on this site to enable it, to bring it there and bringing the activity into the site. The type of use on here isn't the high-end industrial, it's more local business and industrial uses which will be appropriate, which will rely on the Cala investment and infrastructure to bring the development forward. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does answer the majority of it. The next thing, you say that you're going to contribute with a new bus service linking Gilston Farm with Pullman railway station.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, but we've all seen how fickle the bus companies can be and how quickly they can be cut back. What's going to happen to the people living in that area should those bus companies decide that they're no longer wanting to take part in that? It's a fair old hike from there to the railway station, and obviously in this day and age we're trying to cut down the use in cars.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in this instance, we're creating a bus route through the site, which will be able to get used by the bus services. There's a contribution to subsidise the bus route for a period of time to get that established, to make sure it's commercial, give it the best chance of being commercially viable for the operator. And that's ultimately comes down to the level of use by the residents there and also the wider local community. What we are doing is the master plan, as you'll see, has a significant amount of active travel planned within it, which will encourage all sorts of sustainable transport uses, not just the bus and public service, but also the cycle routes and footpaths that are there. So the design which is here will give that bus service a subsidy, will give that bus service the best chance of it being sustained in the long term.
Thank you. Finally, at this point, in one of your leaflets, you said you will contribute to active travel improvements, including new connections to the Forth and Clyde Canal. Could you explain that a wee bit, please?
Yeah, we had a request from the council's open space officers to look at access improvements to the canal, both in terms of the southwestern and southeastern corners. So there's already a public right-of-way and footpath connection at the southwestern corner, and at the southeastern corner, our site is actually a bit separated from the canal. And we were requested to look at either provision of a path or a contribution towards improving the footpath along Nicolton Road and the sort of staircase up towards the canal. There wasn't full details discussed at that point, but we very much put forward that we'd be happy to look at the developer being able to provide some of these links, or if not, discuss with the council about contributions.
Thank you for that. I'd point out, though, that that canal is not the Forth and Clyde Canal, that's the Union Canal at that point.
Oh, sorry, apologies, it is, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Redmond.
Right. I think I've got loads of questions, but I think I'll just start with this one. I received an email at Cala and it said that it developer contributions in the region of £8 million. So I'm just wondering, is that £8 million a limit, or is it just in, like, how much could it potentially go up by? So we've got here, obviously the £8 million is going towards schools, nurseries, and then if you can see, I've got it here in Roman numerals. I can't really read Roman numerals, but 8.1, one of the very last ones, provision of 25% of the residential units at a site will be affordable housing. So the affordable housing is paid for by part of the £8 million. So one of my questions is...
sorry.
It's not?
No, sorry, it's separate. So the affordable housing will be delivered on site. That is separate to the developer contributions package. Developer contributions package is managed in terms of the figures through the council's contributions policy, SG13, which comes up with 8 million. That could move depending on indexation. Right. Because the costs are allowed for in SG13 are indexed from a date when that cost is fixed. So that will move as we go along to deliver in 2025, when we start to make payments 26-27. That 8 million package will increase with indexation.
All right, that's good. One further question. Well, I've got more questions, but another one. What is the Cala Homes definition of an affordable home?
So affordable, it's not our definition of affordable home, it's the council's definition of affordable home, which will determine what the 25% affordable delivery is. We don't determine that, that's a council policy which is determines affordable housing, which in this instance I would imagine would be subsidised affordable housing. That's the next stage. Once if you're minded to approve today, which I hope you are, that's a discussion we'll start to have with the council's housing department. What is it they need? What's the housing need for their affordable here, and what's the appropriate mechanism to deliver that for them?
Right. Well, maybe the officers could help do that up as a later stage. The last part, page 86. What we had, reason number 4. The proposed development and assessment of its effects on infrastructure are predicted on a maximum number of 500 dwellings. page 52. Let's see. One more. 1.1 residential land for approximately 500 dwellings. It's in the reasons, but is there anything in the report that limits the site to 500 homes? Like, we are given planning permission in principle, which I actually looked at, lost it now, with this drawing, I don't know, and I counted the houses at that side, and there was 144 homes in there. And, you know, we're talking about flats and everything on a much, much bigger site. What's to say it's limited to 500 homes? Could they go at the detailed planning stage and maybe sneak in? And I'm not saying Cala would do that, but I'm just saying, how do we make sure that doesn't happen? Is there anything?
Yeah, I think part of that's for the planning officer to deal with, but from our point as Cala have come in to look at this, the constraint on 500 homes is in relation to the Lathallan Junction and discussion with Transport Scotland in terms of the junction upgrades happening and capacities in the roads. So that can get looked at as a time to come through, but it gets controlled through the approval of matters specified in conditions. So the next stage of the applications as we come in, the unit numbers that will be done in a phased basis, and the unit numbers will be considered through those applications, whether it's appropriate for the amount of units that are applied for to be approved by the council or not. And the council, I would assume, is for the case officer to advise you probably on that. They will have reference back to that constraint highlighted from Transport Scotland in terms of 500 units at Lathallan Junction. But I'll leave that for the case officer to confirm with you.
Brent, maybe you could come in on that specific point at this minute.
Thanks, Convener. The report recommendation sets out number of conditions. If the commission was minded to approve, there is a recommended condition that the number of units be restricted to no more than 500. There is a proviso that unless otherwise agreed in consultation with Transport Scotland, based on the transport capacity study being undertaken on the basis that there would be a restriction of 500 units. So certainly that would be a recommended condition to attach to any planning permission. If there was a proposal for more than 500 units, then our view that would set out with the terms of any PPP approval, and would have to go through a separate process for a separate application, which may well, if it did come in, find its way back to committee for committee determination. Thank you.
That's great, thanks. I think that's all my questions for now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Redmond. I'm looking about any other councillor want to come in at this stage to questions to either the agent or Mr. Vivian or officer. Councillor Murtagh, then Councillor Steenbank. Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, Provost. So I suppose if it's questions as well with Mr. Vivian, one of the Kinnaird has been mentioned a couple of times. Obviously, declaration of being one of the councillors for Cars Kinnaird and Trice, obviously very familiar with the development at Kinnaird and the history of it. One of the things about this particular site and the mixed-use development aspect of it and the commercial units that are therefore part of the plan, and then obviously the history at Kinnaird was that there was a design which included commercial units, included more commercial units than what were then even built, but commercial situation or market forces meant that not all of those units could be let for most of the time that was intended. And again, I think where the flats were originally intended to actually have commercial units underneath it, and that had to change. So I suppose one of the concerns, knowing how important this is to the kind of viability overall of what the site is like, you know, not having just housing but having that mixed use development, is kind of what commercial assessment has been done by CALA, specifically in terms of the you know, the likelihood of being able to fill those properties, and obviously in Kinnaird what had to happen is there had to be a variation on the way that the design was, but also then even on things which were retained, there were conditions in there that had to be removed in terms of what was originally intended. So I think that is one of the probably the concerns in terms of the whole overall site. I have to say I would have had a lot of questions, but I've never seen so many advices and conditions on an application before, and I think probably you know, when we're starting to get into double letters of things, you know, a lot of those things were answered by the report. So I'm grateful to officers for the detail in which they've gone in with that recommendation, and obviously the cross discussion that must have had to happen between that. I would have had a lot more questions, but it's on that kind of how does that the master planning, how does it ensure that what's in the plan is deliverable, and what is the confidence there in that in terms of adaptability is my kind of main question, really.
I think that would be you, Brent. You're mute, Brent.
Sorry, I was on mute. I think one of the points raised by Councillor Murtagh was in terms of what commercial assessment CALA had carried out to date. So I'd respectfully ask whether CALA or Ian could perhaps initially comment on what work they've done so far in terms of commercial assessment.
Certainly, Brent. I'll pick that up to begin with. So with the application, we prepared a development land review that we actually prepared an original one at the time of the application submission. It was done by a respected agent, Savills, and also included an update on marketing activity and discussions that the applicant Hanstein had held over the years. Now this is sort of Hanstein's business area was looking at, is looking at commercial businesses and lets and arrangements. So they've been well placed to have discussions throughout. In the run up to the last committee, and therefore this one as well, we updated that development land report. So that's in with the package, but that includes a table essentially with different notes of interest or inquiries that we've had over the time. We have had interest from commercial users as we go along, and a key part of it has really been us having to set the parameters and see, what would be happening with this planning permission in principle. The key thing for us, the approach that we've taken for this, is we've recognised the importance of the mixed use for the creation of this as a place as a whole. But with it being a PPP as well, we've tried to keep it as flexible on how that sort of interaction will happen between the homes and the housing. There might be some questions about the neighbourhood centre, for example. We've kept that at the mixed use area, so we've got that flexibility of design to create, something that will be the most attractive for delivery by the market. We didn't want to set specific things like shops under units, units under houses, for example, in any level of detail, and then find out the market might not be responsive. So we are confident that when CALA get on board and deliver, that we can have these discussions and add more flesh to it.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, we have looked at the commercial reality of delivery. I understand what you're saying, Councillor Murtagh, in terms of our experience at Kinnaird, and we have learned from that, and that's part of what invited us into this, in terms of seeing the approach that the council and Hanstein, the design team, had taken here. There's a thorough review of the market requirements in the area, and sites of circa 2 hectares are the sites that have sold for local small-scale business needs in the area in Falkirk in the last 5 years. That's been the highest demand, and that is what we're looking to satisfy here on that site. The combination of that with the neighbourhood centre brings a scale and the footfall, which gives both of them the likelihood to be successful. But as I said during the presentation and during a previous answer, the delivery of the housing is the catalyst for the best chance of the commercial employment area being successful.
Back to you, Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks for the answer.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Steenbank, then Councillor Kerr. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. So I think my question will be more for the officers than the applicant at this point. It's page 37 through 39 on potential odour impacts within the report. At the bottom of page 38, the last paragraph, I just want a bit of clarification on the definition of unfavourable dispersion condition. Dispersion conditions within that paragraph, suggesting that the odour impact would only occur 2.3% of the time when it's under unfavourable dispersion conditions. I'd just like a bit of expansion on what sort of odour impact we're looking at during that 2.3% of the time. Is that the exclusive window where there will be odour impacts, and at what degree? As well as obviously in page 39, there's the bottom half the paragraph, there's something about the landfill ban coming in. So I just want a bit of an expansion of the degrees of odour impact, and especially during that 2.3% window, what that's been adjudged to have been. I know in the previous paragraph there's talk about local housing complaints being quite low, as well as only during the early morning and early evening. But I'm just trying to get a bit of an explanation of what the degree of impact within that 2.3% window looks like.
Okay, thank you for that, Craig. We'll bring in Mr. Gray. Can you hear me, Mr. Gray?
I can. Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button there.
Fine.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Steenbank. So my officers in the Environmental Protection Unit have reviewed the odour and dust risk assessment that was produced by Hanstein in 2020, and that sets out the methodologies for bits and pieces that you refer to there. The specifics of the unfavourable conditions are down to wind direction, pressure variances, that type of thing. And that report basically concludes that there are, there is an element of risk of odour affecting them. The properties, more so the commercial properties. Within that, there's quite a lot of detail behind the analysis, which they've reviewed. I had a look at that again myself this morning. The methodology of that is an agreed UK standard, if you like. But odour is a very subjective issue, and I remember from the site visit here we had quite a lot of discussions about it. I think the main thing there is, you're right, there were historically a lot of complaints there. It is still an active landfill site. That's supposed to wind down over the next few years, but there will still be the landfill gas, which will be generated for a long time, and that is what produces the smell. You'll know that. And I understand from what the developer said there that that's to be integrated into the district heating scheme. I presume from the landfill site, the power generation that's still there. There is an element of risk there. The risk is more so for the commercial side. There is a history of complaints. It has reduced in recent years, and I know that SEPA did take some enforcement action against the operator at Avondale, which is presumably why there have been fewer complaints. But there is quite a lot of detail on the methodology and what those risk factors are in terms of the odour for the site. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah.
Councillor Steenbank.
Yeah, well, thank you for that answer. It mostly does. I think my follow-up to that would be, so that 2.3% window would be a more severe or significant risk window, or is that the 2.3% window is the only risk that's being factored in, is what I'm getting at? Because as you sort of mentioned, the odour in the area, there have been complaints, and especially as you drive down that motorway, I think anybody who has driven down that part of the motorway can attest to the fact that there is a distinct odour, but it can vary. So is the 2.3% window sort of when it would be insufferable, or is it simply where it would impact upon the site and we'd simply have to put mitigation measures in, as is sort of illustrated on page 39?
Not an easy question to answer that, to be honest. And maybe that's something that Ian might be able to add to, I don't know, but The 2.3% is a risk window, if you like. What you're asking there is how badly that will affect. They're classifying it under the final methodology and everything as being extremely low. I don't know that there's an easier or more in-depth answer I can give you to that, but perhaps Ian can assist.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Gray. I can come in there. Of the 2.3% is the limited time, and that would have to align. So that's when the climatic conditions could result in the odour, but it would also have to align with that 2.3% with a discharge, either an emergency discharge or unplanned. Would have to happen within that 2.3% of the time. We've looked at that very carefully, as you can imagine. As I was talking about quite big figures of investment, 120 to 130 million. We do a lot of risk analysis against that level of investment, as you can imagine, to make sure sites are commercially viable. And we think we're of the firm view that the site presents an excellent opportunity to provide much needed homes within a high quality environment. We recognise that the landfill site is there, but we're not concerned with regards to the residential environment. The master plans you see in the northeast corner is less sensitive receptors in terms of the commercial uses, and the mitigation factors within the report will be considered as we go into the detailed design for the approval matters specified conditions.
Thank you for answering that question. Happy with that, convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Steinbank. Councillor Kerr, then Councillor Forrest.
Thanks, convener. And nobody, anybody in here know this site better than yourself, convener, as this has been a long winded affair for the site, and it has got a huge history behind it. My worry is it doesn't matter what we decided today. If we were minded to refuse, the thing that always comes back to bite us is the effective land supply. Can I ask, whether it's Mr. Vivian or Mr. Dryden, at what stage are we as a council to meet our targets for the effective land supply? And on the caveat of that, with this being in a local development plan, are these 500 houses taken into the current effective land supply?
Thank you, Career. Thank you, Councillor Kerr. You raise a valid point, and yes, I would confirm this site is, as you'll see from the report and heard this morning, this is in your development plans and allocated site. The figure being mentioned is quite a considerable amount of houses, and that would count to the effective housing land supply. As you'll know, throughout deliberations on a number of applications through this planning committee, that effective land supply is something we are mindful of, and there are occasions where we have had some issues that have been reflected in some of the decisions that have happened in the past. So yes, this is a critical factor, and certainly the scenario that you point out, should you be minded to refuse, this would have an adverse impact on the effective housing land supply as it stands, and that's something that clearly is something to carefully think about. But as you'll be aware as well, through the forthcoming new LDP3 process, which is about to commence, albeit that'll take time, and that's something we'll have to look at and review, and that's something that's ongoing. But as it stands just now, there is ongoing discussions about our current effective land supply, including this site, which is relevant. I don't have the figures at this point in time where we are. It is something we're mindful of, and I think there is still a shortfall, albeit not a significant shortfall, but certainly to not support the application or the officer recommendation would have a further impact on the effective housing land supply.
Thank you, Mr. Dryden.
I can maybe help a bit more on that if you wanted, Councillor Kerr. I was going to mention that the shortfall at the moment is not it's not hugely significant, but we do have a shortfall. We have an effective housing land supply of 4.8 years rather than 5 years, which equates to 122 units. And according to the latest housing land audit, or the estimates within that audit suggest that by 2024, 2025, this site would be expected to start delivering houses, which I think aligns with what the applicant was suggesting earlier. Non-delivery of this large scale allocated site or a delay in delivery on the site would have a potential impact on effective housing land supply going forward in the future.
Thank Mr. Vivian. Thanks, Mr. Dryden.
Convener, would you mind if I just came in to clarify Cala's timescales there?
Right, carry on.
In terms of housing land supply, thank you. At the moment, it's shown in the housing land audit to contribute in 24 and 25. Just now, the best case for us to get there would be in February 25, because after this, we have to go through the approval of matter specified. We have to clear a lot of the conditions that Councillor Murtaugh was saying. There's an awful lot for us to work through here with the council and other departments and external agencies. So even with the best case for us now, it will be February 25 when we start to contribute. So there'll be an additional pressure on the housing land supply at the end of 24.
Okay, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Convener. With regards to the subsidies of the F25 service, leading on from what Councillor Forrest says, we're saying that we're going to subsidise it for a period of time. Is there a specific amount of time? Is it a year, 2 years, 3 years?
Councillor Kerr, it's normally 3 years would be the period of subsidy.
Okay. So that will that be for when it starts or when it's complete?
That would be determined through the terms of the section 75 in terms of when that date of subsidy would commence. So there's obviously work to be done on that in conjunction with our transport planning colleagues.
Understand that, Ben, but if we're saying that it's going to start on a date and it's going to take 3 years for it to be delivered, I would like a bit more clarity of when it will happen, because it could be to the stage where they've started it, by the time they finish it, the subsidy's finished.
Could I maybe come in that in terms of our experience elsewhere? Is that okay, Councillor Cox?
Yes, then you come.
Okay. Our approach to this is discussions with the Transport Department of the Council and the regional transport partners that manage the bus services that are in there to pick the appropriate time for the subsidy to start. Because if you start right at the beginning, there's obviously nobody living there, so the subsidy's not really doing anything, but we don't want to start too late because then travel behaviours are already established. So there's a bit of work to be done when we start to work out our programme and our phasing. And then once that's known and there's certainty there, it's working with those transport partners to agree now's the time to implement this bus service for it to be subsidised for the 3 years, because it'll have the critical mass of use without allowing it to go too far and allowing other transport patterns to be established. So it's a bit of work in the next stage, and it can't be determined just now. It's really about the phasing and the programming to come, if that helps.
It does. You've seen exactly where I was coming from. There's no use in bringing a subsidy in at the start or halfway through it if it's not going to be effective for the residents going forward. So I'm quite happy with your response. With regards to the school contributions, as one of the local members with Mr. Councillor Forrest, we know that St Margaret's Primary School is a very well attended school, and the contribution now 2.5-ish million for that school. I don't know if there are anybody for education here. Is there areas at that school that we would be able to develop at the present school if we needed to increase the capacity at the school?
Ben, you want to come in this one?
Yeah, I can try. The advice from Children's Services is that capacity can be increased the primary school to cater for the expected children from this development, and that would be through an extension to the primary school. I expect if Children's Services didn't think there was space on the site to accommodate an extension to the school, then their response to us would have been quite different, and potentially they would have objected to the application on that basis. But certainly the advice to us is that they would take a contribution to extend the primary school to increase capacity.
Thanks for trying to answer that question, but that's not the question asked. The question asked is there an area at the school where, if an extension or modular, whatever it is there sufficient areas at the school for this to happen? And I understand you're saying, well, if it wasn't the education, that's no answer I want to hear. I want this for somebody to say yes or no.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think we've got MD for education here, so we're relying on the planning officer, Mr. Riven. Mr. Riven, you want to come back on that one?
Well, it's just really just to reiterate that the advice that we have had from Children's Services is that they would advise that a contribution would be taken and is appropriate to address capacity issues arising from this development, and that would be in the form of an extension to the primary school.
I could come in just go comment.
You okay, Mr. Ryan?
I think it's the points you're raising are very valid. Again, I think coming back to the application that's before you, this is obviously the principle of development. They're all a very valid point. I think the point to point out, given the scale of development that's been piloted already this morning, this is quite a significant sized application, and clearly it will take a number of years to develop. And you've heard from the applicant this morning that the time frame to start, probably in reality on the ground, there's a lot of preparatory work to be done. It'll be 2025, and a lot of things can happen and circumstances can change. And I think certainly you'll see from the recommendation as well, there are a number of further matters of applications to be specified in conditions. So there'll be further submissions that will follow in due course, and likewise through the negotiation of the planning obligation. I think if it's any comfort to the committee, what we can do is clearly it is likely there'll be further applications that will be connected with this development, should you be minded to grant the application this morning subject to the conditions. And certainly we can give an undertaking to bring those applications back if that's what you wish. And more importantly as well, we can also update you periodically as a committee, because given the circumstances and the size of this application, it probably does merit that. So again, if that's any comfort to you as a committee, we can certainly give an undertaking to bring updates back and provide you information. Because a lot of the points you're raising are very valid, but given the scale of it, and it's an application in principle, a lot of the detail will not become apparent until we obviously development commences, and clearly we have to do a lot of consultation with our colleagues in roads and education, for example, as you've mentioned, and maybe we'll have further details as this progresses, because clearly there are other factors that could come along in the next 18 months, 2 years, that we'll have to take into consideration, and that make obviously the situation a lot clear cut. But it is regrettable we don't have anybody from education here to clarify that. But again, probably it's until really the development gets on the ground, and it's going to take a number of years to develop this site. I think it's safe to say, if you just look at what happened at Kinnaird and the number of years that took to come forward. So I think what I can only offer is that certainly, should you be minded to grant it this morning, is that we can give an undertaking to bring further applications back that are required, and also provide updates as a committee. Keep you posted on this.
Thanks, Mr. Dryden. Before you come in, I was going to just say, so minded to grant, that detail will come forward, and hopefully we been mentioned that it will be in the detail when it does come back, if it's successful today. And probably no a question, but as a council, I'm sure we're always welcoming investment, 140, 150 million in the local area. That's without saying, and the jobs aspect is, I would say, very welcome, and Councillor Forrest and mine's ward, but the developer and Carla Holmes have got to be mindful of the people who already live there and their concerns, and I'm just hoping that if we agree to mind to grant, that their worries can be ironed out at the next stage. Thanks, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Forrest.
Thank you. Just to clarify something, Mr. Gray earlier mentioned that because action had been taken against the local landfill people, the number of occurrences of the smell has decreased. As I live fairly close, I'd like to confirm that the only time that we actually get really bad smells now is when we have fog, and that really does make it pretty obnoxious. The other thing I'd like to say is I'd like to agree with Councillor Kerr. This thing's been going on since I've been a resident of Pullman, over 25 years, in all various guises. From the original plan was to have hotels, garden centres, car showrooms, etc. And now the current suggestion is 500 homes and some mixed-use buildings. Development's not altogether a bad or a good thing. People divided on both sides, and the district sorely needs new housing. But Pullman really at the moment does not have the structure, the infrastructure for it. So any contribution that comes from the developers would be a great asset. How often does any company come to us and say, I've got £140 million I'd like to spend in your area? It doesn't happen every day, and would be totally stupid to say no. But the cost of well, for example, the reporter did say that there are known capacity constraints at local schools, and the council has identified that an extension to St Margaret's Primary would be required. This could be addressed through developers' contributions. The contributions that they're giving towards it are generous, but I'm sure that it wouldn't be enough to build an extension or a new school. They're certainly offering a lot of contributions, but they're going to gain a lot as well. Nowhere else in the central region has got such fantastic links to the motorway. We can be in 5 different cities in Scotland in 45 minutes. It's a top-class site. It's going to be close to tourist attractions, Stirling, our own fantastic kelpies, etc. The wheel. And also it's going to be right on the edge of the new green Freeport. These are fantastic selling points for anybody selling houses. Cala do some very good houses. There's no denying that. You can also charge a lot more if it's in the perfect location, and if they're selling them for higher figures, then I'm sure they could find a few more pounds in the contributions, although that may be limited. It just seems to me that I feel a wee bit like the native Red Indians with the fur traders coming to us and saying, you know, there's some beads, there's some max heads, etc. But we want that land. They want that land, but you know, they could be a little bit more generous. That's my point. Thank you.
We're still at questions now. I think Councillor Steenbank wanted in for another question, and then we'll go to deliberations. Councillor Steenbank.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I do just have a quick question. I'll try and keep this brief because Councillor Forrest did cover a bit of this just previously. I'm just looking at the recommendation within the contributions, and when capacity works would need to be done on St Margaret's Primary School and potentially Graham High School, how are we keeping the lines of communication open to potential changes to the timeline based on the contingencies Mr Dryden was talking about, relative to the timeline that was laid out from the men from Cal earlier? And would we, sort of building on Councillor Forrest's point there, would we need additional resources to pay for these capacity extensions from the expected money that we'll be getting out of the developer contributions? I'm not sure which officer is best directed that towards.
Mr Dryden will come in and that.
Convener, I'll come in at the start, and obviously Brent, being the case officer, has the more detailed knowledge which you'll be able to add. But you're raising a valid point. We do have a planning obligations monitoring group, which clearly is primarily covers all representatives from across the council services, and that includes our education colleagues. And particularly what we will do, obviously again, should you remind me to grant this morning, the obligations will then, it's a 6-month window, I think, that we are being asked to negotiate and discuss with the developing parties. What we will do in that time frame, in the heads of terms, we will look at obviously an agreement amongst the parties where we will expect delivery of contributions. They'll be done in a staged manner, and that will be reflective of the phasing of the development. And sometimes what we do, for example, is we look at how many houses, for example, will be built, are allowed to be built before a certain proportion of that contribution is made. And I think what's important as well, as was mentioned earlier on, these are all index linked. This is over a large time frame, so again, index link will apply, and obviously contributions will actually be provided at the right time and will be index linked accordingly. So it's something we're mindful of, and the agreement will cover the contingencies of what you're mentioning to ensure that the contributions are paid continuously at the right time, and that will involve an ongoing dialogue, certainly behind the scenes with the developer and our education colleagues, to ensure that we are the capacities identified where the pinch points are. Should they arise, we will make sure that in advance we are actually receiving contributions to ensure that then our capital programme for school expansion is accommodated.
Anything you add to that, Brent?
I think Ian's covered it comprehensively. It was just maybe to note that the figures for education contributions, which are detailed in the recommendation, that they are the figures from our supplementary guidance on education. So they are the rates that we would normally impose, and they're the rates that the children's services have requested we use for this application.
Thank you. Provost Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. I don't have any question, but is it okay if we go to deliberations just now? Okay. I've listened to everything that's been said, and most of my concerns have been addressed, and this has been going on a long time, and I'm glad to see we're at this stage. It's a fantastic opportunity, as Councillor Forrest said, for the area. A significant investment of 120 million, 500 new homes, 8 million towards education, etc., and 150 direct and 400 indirect jobs. Given that we've got the Kelpies on the doorstep, and we've got the Falkirk Wheel and Falkirk Distillery, and it's such a Falkirk's the place to be, and we're trying to grow the economy, and we've come out of COVID, so I think this is a great opportunity to move forward and give some hope and encouragement to the area. And so, as Mr Dryden said, that we would receive regular updates, and I'd be quite comfortable with that. So, on balance, having heard everything that's been said, I'm quite happy to be minded to grant and move the officer's recommendations that we agree planning in principle. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, there's been a lot of questions, there's been quite a lot of statements already, and I don't disagree with many of them. We will have a full application still to follow this, because this is only a planning permission in principle, so a lot of the questions that were asked today will actually get answered in the full application. It is contained within LDP2. I don't think we had actually voted against it going in, but it went to the reporter, and the reporter put it back in to our LDP2. So it's part of that. Councillor Kerr and I spoke about housing land supply, and it was a concern. I think both of us had, it's fair to say. To not have this in gives us a bigger problem, because if your housing land supply does get bad, then what you tend to find, and the developers are legally allowed to do this, not decrying it, but they can then start to apply for any greenfield sites that they like, because we don't have the housing land supply. I think what was spoke about earlier on by Mr. Dryden about how we're actually not far away from our housing land supply is actually a credit to us, because I think with the time that it started and the period it's actually operated in, it's the construction industry's been closed down, the problems that we've had over the last couple of years. I think that's a very good situation, and there's mitigating circumstances of it. If we then start dropping out 500 house sites from our own LDP, I think then we become very open to it. I'm going to keep it quite simple in that, and I will gladly second the Provost.
Has been planned out to say that, you know, no, particularly in terms of the upgrades to the roundabout at Allen, to the situation in terms of how many houses can be occupied before you know, the units are finished in terms of commercial. I think they're all really important. We've heard a little bit more about the bus detail there, and I think that it does give me a level of confidence, and it's good to hear that not mistakes but issues that arose at Kinnaird in particular, and how long that site take to develop, considering how long this site will also take to develop. And we all know the changeable economic circumstances we're in, that's been acknowledged, and that those conditions are really important so that we can continue to monitor that and not get in that situation where the master plan had to vary so differently, or, you know, the end result from the master plan. So I'm encouraged by that. I would thank officers and you know, for their work with that and outlining that, but just give a plea that that is also continued to be progressed given the circumstances that we're in, you know, globally, nationally, etc. But also given the experience we know we had at Kinnaird, and how crucial that's been to the development there. So I'm happy to support the motion, but just would make those points that it's really important that continuation of that dialogue, and that the spirit of what's been laid out in those recommendations is taken forward.
Okay, thank you for your input, Councillor Murtagh. There's been a motion moved and seconded to agree the recommendation contained within the report. Is there anybody otherwise minded? Agreed? Okay, thank you. Takes us to item 5. Obviously, that's been one of the biggest applications that's came before this council over the period of 20 years. And I thought it was a very good debate this morning, and a lot of questions that were asked by members, especially the new members, who did really well in trying to get as much information as possible before they could make an informed decision. So well done to you all. Okay, then we're going to item 5, which is construction of dwelling house at Wester Bank Knock Denny for Mr. McGregor Drummond. It's pages 108 to 124. It was subject to a site visit. Before we bring in Julie Seidel-Gregory for the report, an application had been made by John Payton, agent, to be received as a deputation to be heard in respect to this item of business. We agreed to hear Mr. Payton. Agreed, thank you. Okay, then we'll go straight to Julie to give us a report. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Convener. This application was considered by the Planning Committee on the 21st of September, when it was agreed to continue the application to allow the committee to carry out a site visit to view the physical characteristics of the site. The site inspection took place on the 3rd of October. Members viewed the application site and looked at the location of the proposed house, the surrounding site context, including the access track and existing house on neighbouring land. Jack, if you're able to, can you pull up the historic photograph of the site, please? At the site visit, members noted the presence of stone and rubble. At the application site, members asked if the site was previously developed. A review of historic photographs held by the council did not show any past development at the application site. The photograph that's displayed at the moment is a post-war photograph. It shows the existing building at the site. and it also shows the existing access track and the trees. There are no buildings or other structures shown at the location of the proposed house. No matters were arising at the site inspection which would alter the recommendation to refuse planning permission. Members should note the proposed reasons for refusal at section 5 of your update report, which includes non-compliance with the development plan, including relevant countryside policies and road safety concerns. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you very much, Julie. We'll ask Mr. Payton to come forward, and if you come to the end there and you press the wee button on the microphone, then you'll get 10 minutes to state your case. Thank you, sir.
Can I have your permission to hand out a photograph? It was a photograph that appeared in the planning statement, which, if I can just... A couple of... Firstly, thanks very much for letting me speak on behalf of Mr. Drummond. Very good. I'd like to start by summarising a couple of key principles of the application. Point out that Mr. Drummond's family has owned Western Banknook for several decades. He wishes to build a house within the farmsteading area for his own occupation. The site was formerly occupied by farm buildings, which I think the photograph shows, and is vacant and is therefore brownfield land. And there's still the base of buildings there, there's still foundations, and it's not a site that could be used for any other purpose other than lying vacant. He deliberately commissioned the design of a house that would harmonise with the existing farm buildings by using traditional materials of stone and timber. And he proposes to include a low carbon heating system in the house. His intention would be a hybrid air source solar panel system, with which he has experience of installing elsewhere. The house would be designed to the highest standards of insulation. The farm and the occupants have never had any problems with the existing road junction onto Kelt Road, at cars or farm vehicles. Vehicle speeds are low on the road due to its width and curvature, and good sight lines exist in both directions. The proposed house would be accessed from this same junction. In our planning statement, we argued that the proposal accords with planning policy for the following reasons. It would meet the local development plan 2 objective of enabling continued population and household growth and the delivery of housing to meet the full range of housing needs. We argue it complies with policy PE14 countryside and policy HCO5 housing in the countryside by being infill development on a vacant brownfield site within a grouping of farm buildings. We analysed policy HCO6 infill development and plot subdivision and found that the proposal accords with it due to the scale, design and materials of the house harmonising with the existing buildings, and that there would be adequate space for parking and garden ground, a generous spacing between the proposed house and the existing buildings, and no trees or walls would have to be removed. We respectfully contend the statements made by the planning officer in the detailed appraisal section of the committee report. Under, for example, policy PEO2, the report states that the development would be unjustified development in the countryside. However, we've already explained that it is a brownfield site within the farmsteading, which means that it complies with policy PE14 and HCO6, which establish criteria for acceptable development in the countryside. The report then claims that safe access cannot be achieved. The applicant confirms that the access has been used by his family for decades without any traffic accidents or even access difficulties occurring. Kelt Road is a minor rural road which serves as access to many houses and farms, and similar accesses exist throughout its length, which likewise have never caused traffic difficulties. Under PE14, we commend the planning officer's analysis that the dwelling would be modest in design and would not be a dominant feature in the landscape. Under policy HCO1, the report claims that the proposal does not constitute sustainable development. However, we contend that use of a previously built-on brownfield site for a house built to high insulation standards with low carbon heating is sustainable. Under policy HCO5, we've already explained why the development complies with the infill criteria of this policy, being a previously developed site with farm buildings. Under IR13, the applicant fully intends to install on-site low and zero carbon generating technologies in the design of the house. We would respond to the 3 reasons of refusal given in the report to you as follows. We submit to the committee that the proposed house is on infill land within a farmstead building group and was formerly occupied by farm buildings. This qualifies it as acceptable development in the countryside under policies PE14, HCO5 and supplementary guidance SGO1. We argue that the proposed house is sustainable development due to its proposed location on brownfield land, the applicant's intention to install low carbon heating and to utilise the highest standards of insulation. The applicant and his family's long experience of living at Wester Banknock give him total confidence that use of the existing access junction onto Kelp Road is suitable for the minimal additional traffic generated by the proposed house. Furthermore, we note that the consultation response from the Council's Roads Department stated vehicular traffic generated by the proposal is unlikely to sufficiently affect the capacity of the public road network. We conclude that this proposal is for a sustainable house to be built on vacant brownfield farmland within a farmsteading. By its proposed use of traditional materials, its design would harmonise with the existing buildings, and being within a cluster of other buildings surrounded by trees and higher land, it would integrate into the landscape and not be a prominent or in any way discordant feature. I therefore respectfully urge the committee to grant this planning application.
Thank you very much, sir, for your presentation. And now open up for members. Any questions to Mr. Payton?
Convener, I just wonder
yes, Provost.
If there's a picture of the building.
Yeah, did you not get a copy?
Yeah, drawing.
The drawing, I don't think so.
Drawings of the proposed development.
Or the proposed development?
Just so we can make a comparison with what's already there, really.
I presume they're in your committee pack.
Julie, have you got any sketches?
The drawings, Jack can show the drawings for the proposed dwelling house. Just to highlight the picture, the image that's been circulated by the applicant that shows, I would say, unsubstantial buildings. Those are no longer on site. What we viewed on site was rubble and stone. We did not view any buildings that were standing and intact. Indeed, I don't think we viewed any foundations either. Jack can hopefully pull up the drawings for the proposed dwelling house. If you just zoom in, Jack, you can see the proposed house. It's a fairly modest, traditional and designed 1.5-storey dwelling house. What we might be able to do if members need a reminder of the site circumstances is look at the site photographs if need be, but obviously we've visited the application site.
You're saying the applicant wants to live in the house himself. As a family member, going to stay in the existing house? Is this? explain.
The applicant, Mr. Drummond, fully intends to occupy this house. He's building it for himself. Other family members occupy the other building on the site. He could maybe confirm who they are.
Thank you.
Sorry, apologies. Any other questions to Mr. Payton? He can go back to his seat and we'll start deliberations. Okay, Mr. Payton, and thank you very much for your presentation, sir. Thank you. Okay, then open it up to members who would like to come in at this stage.
I come in.
Yes, and Councillor Redmond.
I think I've got a good reputation there. I'm kind of inclined to agree with him. I think we did see the site whilst they were made, or by modern standards, what you would call foundations. I would say that there was clearly buildings there. We can see by this picture, which is actually really good. I think this has kind of changed things this morning, this picture, that there is a lot of development there. So yeah. I would agree that it is brownfield site. I think the road, we went up to the site, obviously it was a country road, but if the applicant and his family is already using that road, I don't think it's going to be much increased traffic on it. So I think I would be minded to grant this.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Provost Bissett.
I would tend to agree with the fact that this is a brownfield site and it's been an existing development before. So I would support the mandate to grant.
Okay, thank you for that. Have we got anybody else want to come in at this stage? Just to clarify, Councillor Bowes, I can see in the corner there.
Thank you, convener. I get a wee bit more questions. These look like temporary buildings that are on here. What we've seen was stone. There was sections of stone from a stone built building. This is from what I can see here. That's like an old the corrugated iron sort of arts building, this and hut type thing, and the others look as well like temporary buildings. The one at the back's definitely temporary building as well. But that's actually away, I think, slightly from where the main part of the house is going to get built. So I think what we've seen on site is potentially where materials have been dumped, to be honest with you, because it was big sections of stone. It wasn't brick. If it had been brick, I'd probably think, yeah, that could be the basis of it. But it's not. It's actually, since it was dressed stone, there was actually a line there. So I'm not. I get the picture. I wish it was just a bit clearer because I kind of see one of the buildings there, which looks a wee bit more substantial. But I don't think that there was anything substantial on that site. I think, sorry, Julie's picture as well shows that obviously just pre-war there wasn't anything there at all. And these are being temporary farm buildings that have been put up. I just don't think there's people knowing. Well, people have been on this committee with me before know that if I'm certain that it's a brownfield site, then I would be the one arguing for it. I'm not certain in this case, so I would tend to go with the officer's recommendations because I'm not 100% convinced that is a brownfield site. It's something where there's been temporary farm buildings on, but I don't think it's a brownfield site.
Sorry, so you're putting forward an amendment then to go with the officer's recommendation, yes. Councillor Bowes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so just to clarify once again, we have a motion moved and seconded to grant the application, and we've got an amendment moved by Councillor Bowes to go with the officer's recommendation to refuse. First of all, we got a seconder for Councillor Bowes.
Convener, I'd be happy to second that. If I can just again talk kind of similar to what Councillor Bowes has just said, the image that's in the planning statement and the image that we were showing up there seem to be kind of they're obviously different images taken at different points in time. But with that, there seemed to be a construction that was more like a walled garden just in the post-war a walled area, that wouldn't, to me, I wouldn't believe that would constitute some sort of development with a foundation and so on. And like similar again to what Councillor Bowes said, these appear to be temporary buildings, and I don't think I didn't see, from my limited knowledge of how buildings work, I didn't see anything that would say that there's been a building there in the past, other than perhaps a shed or something of that manner. So I would be content to second that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kelly.
Thanks. Can I just talk about the piece? If you look at the top left-hand side of the dotted area, there's actually some sort of building there. You can see windows and a roof, although it's still very clear. But it looks like there's a permanent building there. You see what I'm talking about? And I can't really see, because of the dotted line, I can't see if there's a base to this corrugated iron shed, which was where we saw what looked like a foundation building when we looked at it. It was like raised, and you could see the shape where it sat. It's hard to say without actually digging it up, but it looks to me all right.
Okay, thank you, sir, for your input. Okay, just to clarify where we are, we've got a motion moved and seconded to grant the application, and we have an amendment moved and seconded to go with the offerer's recommendation to refuse. Does anybody else want to come in at this stage till we go to the vote? Anybody? No? Mr. Henderson.
Thank you, convener. And perhaps with the agreement of the mover and seconder of the motion, perhaps I could run through what I took as notes as the reasons for the grant proposal. I had noted that the committee would grant permission as it would be satisfied on the design and materials of the proposed development, and that it would harmonise with the surrounding buildings. That it was considered that the development site was infill land in a farmsteading, and you were satisfied that that was formerly occupied by a farm building.
Yes.
And that was considered to be in accord with policies P14, HCO5 and SGO1. You were satisfied that it would be sustainable development on brownfield land. Yep. And sustainable approaches were being taken to development, and you were satisfied that there would be suitable access for the additional traffic that would be generated. Is that a reasonable summary? And I think broadly you had indicated that you had agreed with the points that had been raised by the applicant's agent. So on that basis, we have that motion, which was by Councillor Redmond and seconded by Councillor Bissett. And we then have an amendment by Councillor Bowes and seconded by Councillor Sinclair to agree the recommendations of officers in the report. So I'll call over names by way of roll call. So Provost Bissett. Councillor Bowes.
Amendment.
Councillor Brown is absent. Convener, Councillor Buchanan.
Motion.
And Councillor Colley is absent. Councillor Forrest.
Motion.
And Councillor Kelly.
Motion.
Councillor Kerr.
Motion.
Councillor Murtagh.
You're mute, Councillor Murtagh.
I'm seeing something that looks like an A for amendment. Could you perhaps put your thumbs up if it is amendment?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Murtagh.
Well done.
And Councillor Redmond.
Motion.
Councillor Sinclair.
Amendment.
And Councillor Steenbank.
Motion.
Thank you. We have 7 votes for the motion and 3 for the amendment, and the motion is duly carried. Thank you, convener.
Thank you for that. You can, Mr. Payton, yourself and your colleague can leave if you want at this stage. Thank you. That's what it's going to be. It's 22. We'll have a comfort break for 10 minutes. Okay, back at 10 to 12. Thank you.
Yeah. So,
Anyway,
finish the have a break.
no, I think, well, it depends on how we go. You've got to mind that suit. So we've got that one there. We'll be a site visit for this construction and development, and then we've only got Okay then, everybody, thank you very much. We're ready to reconvene. We go straight to item 6, which is the construction of dwelling house with associated development, including outbuilding and stables at site to the northwest of 47 Manison Holdings, Blackness, for Mr. and Mrs. James and Catherine Thompson. It was subject to a site visit. The report is by Julie Seidel. It's pages 125 to 145. And could I say at this stage that it was a very, very interesting site visit. And I'd like to thank Julie for taking us through it. There's a lot of information that came forward, and I'm quite sure that members appreciated the visit. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Convener. This application was considered by the Planning Committee on the 21st of September, when it was agreed to continue consideration of the application to allow the committee to carry out a site visit to view the physical characteristics of the site. The site inspection took place on the 3rd of October. Members viewed the application site and looked at the location of the proposed development and surrounding site context. Specifically, members looked at the difference between this current application site in relation to surrounding houses, roads and mature trees, noting the differences from the last application proposal. Planning agent has submitted a short statement which notes that this application follows on from an application last year which was also taken to committee. The application and the design itself were considered exemplary by the committee, but the position of the house was too far away from the road and therefore did not meet planning policy. Following on from committee, the design was revised to fully comply with infill planning policy by moving it closer to the road, whilst maintaining other exemplary aspects of the design which were specifically commented on at the initial application. No matters were arising at the planning site visit or in terms of the comments from the agent which altered the recommendation to grant planning permission. Planning conditions are set out in section 5 of your update report. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much. One of the areas that was considered on the site was HCO5 housing in the countryside. There's a lot of questions being asked about how you define the policies, and I'm quite sure that members would be gratified that we got all the answers there on site for Julie. So I'm opening it up to members right away. Anybody get any input at this stage? Are you happy to agree the recommendation?
Agreed.
Agreed. Has everybody agreed? Members in remote, you agreed to that? Okay, thank you very much, everybody. It's agreed. Thank you. That takes us to item 7 on your agenda this morning. Construction of dwelling house at land to the south of Greyrig Farm, Falkirk, for Unique Development Scotland Limited. It's pages 146 to 174. Thank you very much. The officer coming forward with this one is going to be Julie again. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Convener. This application was considered by the Planning Committee on the 21st of September, when it was agreed to continue consideration of the application to allow the committee to carry out a site visit to view the physical characteristics of the application site. The site inspection took place on the 3rd of October. Members viewed the application site and looked at the location of the proposed house in the surrounding site context. No matters were arising at the site inspection which would alter the recommendation to refuse planning permission. The reasons for refusal are set out at section 4 of your update report. The reasons for refusal include non-compliance with countryside policies and road safety concerns. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Julie. Once again, it was a very beneficial site visit for members, and I'm sure they'll agree. And I'm desperately wanting to hear what members have got to say in relation to this, because it was another time where we had information that was given to us, but going in site, it gives you a better opportunity to see the physicality of the site. Okay then, members. Councillor Kerr, did you?
Thanks, Convener. Like you says, Convener, we visited 4 sites on that particular morning, and they were, I know there are some members are no comfortable with going to sites, but I find them very rewarding, because you see different aspects that you wouldn't see on a picture. And for me, I knew the site previous, being in my last ward, so I knew regarding the derelict area or derelict building, and I'm quite happy to move grant of this with regards to the building. There already been a building there, and that they're going to use this as part of their development. There was concerns by roads with regards to visibility, but having been on site and duly shown us exactly where the entrance was going to be, with the amount of traffic down that road, I'm quite happy that these can be met, convener. So quite happy to propose grant of the application.
Councillor Kelly.
Having been there, and it was really worthwhile going and visiting that, especially the road. And I'm minded to second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kelly. We've got a motion moved and seconded. Does anybody else like to come in at this stage? Councillor Murtagh?
Yeah, I respect what the local members, well, it was previously James's ward. I take a different view in that I don't feel that it is established as in other than housing in the countryside, and there's obviously the criteria in which to go through for that. I think obviously, you know, one of the things, and obviously I have a semi-rural ward myself, and I know that some of the issues about the road questions that come up, in particular, I've got one in the Moss Road to give an example, where quite often the argument is put as, you know, this is a dangerous road, it's a rural road, it needs to, the speed limit should be reduced, etc, etc. But housing having been granted there's nothing that can be done really. It's about the suitability of having housing there at all, rather than trying to do anything to make the road safer. And this, when I look at this site, and I have been, also I didn't go with the committee, it is that way that, you know, it's yes, it can be quiet at times, yes, there can be not the volume of traffic, but at the end of the day, is it just as a suitable location to put a dwelling house in that position? Are there other mitigating factors there? I don't particularly see, you know, looking at what's in the report there, I think that I would be more inclined to go with the officer's recommendation. I don't think that it's been satisfied that there is a reason to go against that. And so I would propose to go with the officer's recommendations.
Okay, thank you for your input. Just to clarify, the motion moved and seconded to grant the application. We now have an amendment moved by Councillor Murtagh to go with the officer's recommendation to refuse. Is there anybody coming in as a seconder for Councillor Murtagh? Councillor Bowes.
Before I declare where I am, I would like to hear from the roads officer on this, because it's obviously a critical point on this. There's obviously a reason why roads have said there is a difficulty here. Can we hear from them on that, please?
Okay, it's Craig. Craig, are you with us? Yes. You'd like to respond to Councillor Bowes? Thank you.
Convener, yes, I'm back in the meeting. Unfortunately, I had some technical difficulties, so I was kicked out for a while. Can you please clarify which item you're deliberating at the moment, please?
To the land, item 7, the land to the south of Greyrig Farm, Falkirk. Councillor Bowes is asking about the roads and what they had stated in the report. So we just want to clarify the road's position on this one. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, this is a response you'll typically receive from us in a rural area. This is an application for housing in the rural setting. There's no footway provision, there's no lighting provision. It's a de-restricted rural road. We have concerns about visibility, as are expressed in the report. That's typical of our position on an application of this nature.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bowes.
Yeah, it's just we've had this before, and I asked a question, and I think the angle of the road was the other way around, and I was told that would actually assist. But I'm taking it because of the angle of this road that you're pretty blind right up until you hit that corner at the peak, which is why there's difficulties with it. That is the case, in which I'm assuming is why the recommendation is against the roadside on it. I'm assuming, am I correct there?
Well, personally speaking, the once we had seen where the access was at the site visit, it was in a it was on the straight part of the road, and I thought that the visibility plays would have been perfect. My own personal opinion, which I'm entitled to. So it wasn't on a bend, and it was on a straight bit of the road, and other members that was there can maybe conclude that that was the case.
Can I refer them back to one we did at Torwood? And I know it was a different roads officers at the time, but I remember there was a number of metres you had to be from the access point before you. There, it's over. It comes over a brow, and it had to be. I think it was something 100 metres up. It was actually a silly number. It was like 93 metres or something. It had to be. How far is the opening here from the blind spot, which is obviously at the peak?
Well, the blind spot that we saw was on the corner where the old house had been. The issue was that the access was further forward going west, and it was well away from the junction. So, personally speaking, I didn't see a problem. I thought that the access would give you clear visibility coming both east and west. So I didn't see a problem myself in that.
Convener, I appreciate that, but I would prefer that no disrespect to yourself, but I would prefer that the roads officer told us how far the access to the property was away from what I can see here becomes a blind spot.
I convener, I'll come back in there. The visibility requirement is determined by the vehicle speed on the main road. In a situation such as the application you're considering, we make a judgment call based on our site visit. We essentially drive past the site on a couple of occasions and judge our speed, and then make a judgment call on visibility from that. If the application was moving for a recommendation to approve or was supported by the planning officer, we would arrange for a survey to be carried out. That would consist of 2 rubber tubes to be fixed on the surface of the road. You've probably seen these throughout the area, and they do a detailed check on vehicle speeds. And from those, we can get the detailed figures that Councillor Bowes is referring to, as was the case in the Torwood application. So we don't have those detailed figures for the current application because our view was visibility isn't acceptable here. This is an application moving for refusal. That information can be provided following completion of a survey.
I would like to see that, so that I'm not agreeing to something that the roads department are going to tell me is a dangerous access point.
Any other member like to come in at this stage? We've heard what our officer said. Heard what Councillor Bowes has said in relation to, I think he's asking for us a continuation of this to allow this report to come forward. Councillor Forrest.
Thank you, convener. I too was at the site meeting, and I went down the hill. I walked down the hill and I walked back towards it. I've got to say this, I wasn't walking at the same speed as a motor vehicle, but I agree with Councillor Bowes that to be on the safe side, I would rather have a survey taken to see if what we think is correct.
Seconding Councillor Bowes' amendment for a continuation to bring the report back. I'll go back to the initial mover of the motion. Councillor Kerr, what do you feel on this situation?
It's not dual carriageway. For them that went to the site visit, it's I don't know if it's a D road. So it's not as if there's hundreds and hundreds of traffic. I'm quite happy with the motion.
Okay, that's fine. I'll go to your seconder, Councillor Kelly. You've heard everything that's been said. The mover of the motion is quite happy to keep the motion in. What about yourself as the seconder?
I'm happy to second it.
Okay,
Still.
okay, thank you. Okay, we'll open up again to other members. Councillor Redmond, did you want in here? Okay, Provost Bissett.
I wasn't on the site visit, but I've been up since and had a look at the site, and I do know the site, and I didn't see a particular issue with the road myself, and I did walk down the brain how we look, but I didn't see anything that sort of jumped out at me that would say, no, don't go ahead with it.
Thank you for that. Anybody else want to come in at this stage?
No.
Councillor Sinclair.
Yeah, for the avoidance of doubt, I think it's important that we are given all of the pertinent information to make any kind of decisions that we have. I think safety, personal safety and safety on country roads is one of the highest priority things that Police Scotland, for example, would put forward. And we know from accident data, for example, that incidents on country roads are more prevalent than they are, say, for example, on dual carriageways, motorways and high traffic areas. I think from that point of view, I'd want to be satisfied that the information on the type of road it is, the visibility and the speeds of vehicles at that point would be catered for within that. So I would be minded to have that information in front of me before we made any decision.
Thank you for your input, sir. For me personally, having been out in sites for all these years, I have got no problem whatsoever in this area, because as Councillor Forrest says, Councillor Forrest, when we went to where the old building was, Councillor Forrest did walk round the bend. Now, we thought at that particular time that the access was going to be there, and then that would have caused a major problem. But the fact is that we walked back up and we're on the level of the road, and then we walked forward and we were shown where the access was. And me personally speaking, I have not got a problem with this. So before we go to the vote, is anybody else like to come in and say anything? Councillor Murtagh.
I suppose it's, I mean, from what I understand of the proposal to grant and looking at the recommendations, I know Mr Henderson is going to come in and do his clarification of, okay, so if we're going to go against the officer recommendations, can we know all the things of why, so that we can have that in a decision. But I'd like to hear the reasons why. I mean, looking at the reasons in the recommendation, notwithstanding and respect others' desire to have the information on road safety, which is really important if we're minded to grant to have that information. But to me, what's said in the reasons for the recommendation to refuse is that it's not overcoming the housing in the countryside. It's not overcoming. It's not sympathetic to the surroundings. There's issues in terms of biodiversity and ecology. It's an unsustainable development in terms of encouraging development there for car use. There's no footway, there's no etc. etc. So from an authority's point of view, from us as a planning committee to agree to have this, to grant this, what I'm sort of struggling to see is why would we agree to this in terms of what is the benefit to Falkirk Council in terms of adding this house in this area when it goes against these policies and there's no mitigating factors against it. And I suppose I know that's basically what Mr Henderson will try and tease out, but I'm not aware of why we would put a recommendation to have this in this location if it's against all these principles, because I haven't heard anything to say what the mitigating factors and benefits are for the council to grant it. So I'm a bit confused, to be honest.
Well, you're perfectly correct, but I think the issue is that we've only been talking about the roads issue. The fact is that housing in the countryside, as you say, has got a lot of policies that determine what decision you take. HCO5 housing in the countryside, and I'll just take you to two of them in relation to this application, is that restoration and replacement of houses were substantially intact, provided that the restored replacement house of a suitable size and design. That's one. I mean, that house, that's one of the site visits I've been, that the house is I wouldn't say it's intact because the roof and some of the sides off, but there's one area. Also, the fact is that conversion or restoration of non-domestic farm build to residential use, including the sensitive redevelopment of redundant farmsteadings. I mean, the fact is that you're correct. Nobody has mentioned anything in relation to the policies of the council when you housing in the countryside, but there's two that I never had an opportunity to speak because you come in quite quickly and quite rightly in terms of the issue about what we were speaking about initially was the roads. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't see a problem in this whatsoever. We've been to many sites, but we're dealing with this site specifically. And the fact is that there is substantial amounts of building that's still there for the previous house. And the area, again, it's a matter of opinion in terms of the visibility display and the access. As far as I'm concerned, and I think it's been pointed out by one or two others, no putting words in their mouth, there isn't a problem. It's on the flat, it's not in the corner, it's on the flat area, it's well away for the corner, and also it's well away for the junction. So thank you for your input. Is Councillor Steinbank want to come in there? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, convener. It's just a question, and I know that Mr. Henderson will get to this, but I want to just have a greater understanding of the sort of limit and scope of the report being proposed as the amendment in this debate. I also have a question just for the roads team of what engagement would be done to mitigate disruption to sort of road access during construction if the committee is minded to grant and then it is built, because that seems to be the principal sort of concern from the public representation. And I just wanted to add the detail potentially within the public engagement that it was exacerbating previously poor visibility. So I'm wondering whether if the committee is then minded for a continuation to go and look at a report, whether the key question that's being asked is to what degree does that exacerbate the existing poor visibility, or is it going to be a more sort of holistic report on the blind spot in the area anyway, which I think is existing as of now, but correct me if I'm wrong, convener, would not be within really our gift. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your input, sir. Craig, would you like to come back on Councillor Steinbank's points there?
Yes, convener. Construction first. Construction of the site is a matter for the applicant to arrange. The roads department wouldn't be directly involved in that. The only input the roads department would have would be, for example, if a road closure was required to lay a new sewer or a new gas main, something of that nature, the roads department would be involved in that. If there was an abnormal load to be delivered to the site, the roads department may be involved in that. But in terms of general construction, that would be entirely a matter for the applicant to arrange. Sorry, Councillor, I didn't entirely follow your second point about the blind spot. Just to reiterate, we could arrange for a survey to be carried out with the results to be brought back to a future committee that would absolutely determine the visibility requirement here.
Thank you. I think the second part, and I probably could have structured that a bit differently in my 3 points, is probably more for what the scope of the report being proposed would be, and I imagine Mr. Henderson will be able to give an outline of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is there any other member would like to come in at this stage?
To be able to ask a question?
Yeah, indeed. And then Councillor Redmond. Yes, Councillor Murphy.
Sorry, Councillor Redmond, I didn't mean to. If Councillor Redmond's going to come in first, that's just
no, yourself.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I suppose it's on, if I can ask officers, on the point that your good self made there, Provost, about the potential overriding things in the countryside in terms of the building being intact, and you're right to point out it's a matter of opinion about what was there on the existing site, and obviously having seen it and having obviously we had some photographs previously in the previous presentation. What would officers, I don't know if Jack's able to show them, but what would officers' opinion be about what that building represents in terms of whether there's any foundations there that could be realistically built upon? It seemed to be previously that it didn't really constitute anything more than more or less a ruin. So I don't know whether it's possible to kind of come back on that and give an officer view on where they feel that particular policy would apply in that mitigation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Julie's want to come in on that point.
As we've seen at the site inspection, the structures on site we would describe as a ruin. We would not describe it as a building. As is rightly stated, there are several criteria within policy HCO5 housing in the countryside. One of them relates to the conversion or restoration of non-domestic farm buildings. My view would be that the room that's on site is no longer a building. One of the criterion within that is that the building must be substantially intact and capable of beneficial restoration. So normally we would expect to see 4 walls standing, a roof. There might be some damage to a building that would form part of the restoration, conversion and development of that, but certainly not what will be on site. And clearly the view that's expressed in the report is that this application does not accord with the plan, including the policy in relation to countryside and specifically housing in the countryside.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Does that answer your question, Councillor Murray? I'll go to Councillor Redmond.
Thank you. Just looking at the last page, what development to the north, south, and at the kind of crossroad, we've got development on every side of that road, except for the, imagine that'll be the southwest, southeast side, sorry. So I don't see, I think if we've got development all the other 4 corners, I think, you know, is it going to be much difference having development at this corner? You know, with the road, it was a single road. It's not a double road, it is a very narrow road. So you've got houses at the other side. I think if I was driving down that road personally, I'd be going slow, because at any point in that road, there's a chance of an oncoming car. It's no, and you've gone up to a roundabout as well. I think for it to be an accident, it would have to be somebody else driving dangerously. I don't really think it's necessarily going to cause an accident by this house being here. Looking at the drawing, I think it might actually be a very good idea to get the drawing up, but I've got it here, but the access is very, you know, to the far west side. So it is on the straight bit of the road. We've already got 3 properties there that will have similar access to that, albeit they're coming, they'll be heading south when they come in. This access will be heading north. But I think it might be good to get the drawing up and show the committee where the access is, and it would help maybe visualise it a bit better. But I don't really think, I mean, I get where people are coming from. If you've got a car coming out there, and it's a country road, so people sometimes drive fast in country roads, but my argument would be somebody would need to be driving dangerously for it to cause an accident, rather than the actual access itself, which is similar to the houses just to the north of it. So I'm quite happy to go with the motion here. Thank you.
Just to concur with what you've said, and it's a good point, is the fact is that when you're dealing with a planning application, you're dealing with the planning application specifically that's in front of us. But you've got to take into consideration, especially when you go out and site, what's round about. Now, where the crossroads is, members that was in site would know that there was 4 houses and there were 2 stories, and they're built right in the corner with a house across on the corner as well. And the fact is that this, once again, my own personal opinion, and we're all entitled to our opinion, was the fact is that this was well away for the for that crossroads part. And as far as I'm concerned, I would have no problem in supporting the motion. But is there anybody else would like to come in at this stage before we go to the vote? Okay, Mr. Henderson.
Thank you, convener. So where I understand we are at the moment is we have a motion by Councillor Kerr, seconded by Councillor Kelly, and that is to grant permission. We then had a suggested amendment by Councillor Murtagh, but I don't have a note of any seconder to that, which would then take us to the amendment by Councillor Bowes, seconded by Councillor Forrest, and that was to continue the matter for receipt of a roads survey. So if I can maybe try to delve a little deeper into my notes of the motion and amendment there, and just bearing in mind we also have a provision now in our standing orders that you wouldn't put a substantive motion against a procedural amendment or vice versa. So in that case, what I'll do is I'll try to clarify the motion and the amendment that the amendment is a procedural matter. So according to standing orders, the procedure would be to take a vote for or against that procedural amendment. If the vote is in favour of continuation, then that's the decision. If the vote's not in favour of continuation, then the original motion would become the substantive motion against which any further amendment could be made. I hope that makes sense to everyone. So the motion was by Councillor Kerr and seconded by Councillor Kelly. And I have notes here, and please interrupt me if I'm incorrect. I think you indicated you were happy with the design of the design and materials of the proposed development, that you were satisfied that there was a building and it was considered persuasive that there was the existing site of a disused building, which site would be utilised as part of the development. And I also have a note that you were satisfied as to matters of road safety and access, and presumably that would then go with conditions or a delegation to the Director of Place Services to impose conditions. Just looking at the report, and perhaps I could ask for little guidance from the planning officers, but there were some particular conditions that were drawn out in the report. One I noted was in relation to tree survey and protection plan. There was a drainage impact assessment, and there was mention of coal mining and zero carbon. Would they be particular conditions that would be imposed?
Yeah.
So I think unless anyone's got any thoughts to the contrary, I believe that was the motion, and the amendment was that, and this was by Councillor Bowes, seconded by Councillor Forrest, that there was a desire to see survey analysis and a report by the road section in relation to the access arrangements. And I also noted that that would include consideration of the proposed visibility splays and their relationship to the speed on the road. Does that summarise matters? I'm seeing no shaking of heads at this point. So as I mentioned, what we would have at this stage is a for and against vote for the procedural motion, which is the continuation for the further information from the road section. And I see Councillor Murtaugh's got her hands up.
Yeah, it's just on that. So what you're saying is there's a procedural motion for and against the continuation. My question is whether, so if that was to fall, and then you're then going to consider the motion, and it would, at the moment there'd just be a motion, there's no amendment to that then for and against. Do you require notice of a further amendment, or if the procedural motion falls, or is it okay if that fell to then propose a further amendment?
Thank you. I think you've maybe covered off both points. I think you've noted that there would be a further amendment. The wording of the standing orders reads, if the vote is against the procedural decision, the remaining non-procedural motion shall become the substantive motion upon which any further amendment may be moved. So there isn't strictly the need for the notice of further amendment, but we're taking note of that. So thank you.
I'll just give the notice of a potential further amendment should the continuation procedural motion fall, and then that covers that then.
Thank you, Councillor Murtaugh. So as I mentioned, I'll run through. So it will be for or against the procedural motion, which is the continuation for a further report from the roads section. Thank you. Provost Bissett. Against. Councillor Bowes.
For.
Councillor Brown is absent. Convener Councillor Buchanan.
Against.
Councillor Colley is absent. Councillor Forrest.
For.
Councillor Kelly.
Against.
Councillor Kerr.
Against.
Councillor Murtaugh.
For.
Councillor Redmond.
Against.
Councillor Sinclair.
For.
And Councillor Steenbank.
For.
In this case, we actually have an equality of votes. in which circumstance the convener has the opportunity to exercise a casting vote.
Against.
Thank you, convener. So that results in the procedural motion failing, which takes us back to the original motion, the details of which I had narrated, against which any further amendment may be made. Thank you, convener.
Okay, Councillor Murtagh.
Yeah, I would put an amendment again in that case to move the officer's recommendations for the reasons that are outlined in those recommendations, with particular note to housing in the countryside and the fact that the road safety guidelines are against this proposal.
Yeah, thank you for that. Have you got a seconder?
Yeah, convener,
Councillor Sinclair.
I'm happy to second that, given that I don't feel I have enough information based on
it. Okay, thank you, sir. Okay.
Thank you, convener. So we have a motion by Councillor Kerr, seconded by Councillor Kelly, and I won't repeat the motion verbatim once again. You've just heard that. And there is then an amendment by Councillor Murtagh, seconded by Councillor Sinclair, to refuse permission in accordance with the officer recommendations. So Provost Bissett.
Motion.
Councillor Bowes.
Reluctantly amendment.
Councillor Buchanan.
Motion.
Councillor Forrest.
Very reluctantly against.
Very reluctantly for.
Sorry, amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Forrest. Councillor Kelly.
Motion.
Councillor Kerr.
Motion.
Councillor Murtagh.
Amendment.
Councillor Redmond.
Motion.
Councillor Sinclair.
amendment.
And Councillor Steinbank.
Motion.
So we have 6 votes for the motion and 4 votes for the amendment, and the motion is duly carried. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you very much. And maybe just before we go on to the next item, could I maybe bring Craig back in here on a very valid point that you stated that when Councillor Bowes had brought forward the issues in relation to a report coming forward, you said that you wouldn't have came forward with a report like that unless it was a recommendation to grant. Is that correct?
Yeah, I said something to that effect, convener, and the reason for that is if we are giving advice to colleagues in planning, you know, we'll give this application as an example. Our advice in this situation is to give advice that the planning case officer can use in their own recommendation to refuse the application. If that's the road we're going down, we wouldn't want to subject the council to having to put a resource out to carry out a survey. If this was a borderline case where the matter of visibility was going to tip it one way or the other, or we perhaps had a doubt about visibility, then yes, we would organise a survey. So these things aren't black and white, convener. The council has, just to clarify, I'm not responsible for the team that does the surveys, but my understanding is that it's a very limited resource. There are only so many machines, and there's only one person who puts these tubes out. The tubes go out on the road for a week or so at a time. They have to be physically fixed to the road surface to then have to be physically removed a week later. The survey data has to be downloaded. There's 4, 5, 6 machines in the council area, and they're deployed left, right and centre. There isn't a resource to request a survey for every single planning application that we consider. So yes, it would be wonderful to have this data available for every single application that we consider. The resource just isn't available to do that, unfortunately.
Fine. The reason I'm asking that, because it was a very valid point that Councillor Bowes come up with. The issue quite clearly is, though, that you're saying it's a lack of resources. But you, because you're a very professional officer, the fact of the matter is that it's members of the committee that take the final decision. So therefore, a recommendation coming in an agenda for an officer can be overturned, as it does many, many times. So the fact is that if you had if you're explaining the reasons why it's not there, but if that report had been in, then there'd be no dubiety about where we're going. Anyway, thank you very much for that point. Okay, that takes us now to item 8 on your agenda, which is the construction of 2 dwelling housing detached domestic garages at land to the south of 7 Blackberries Road, Falkirk, for Alchemy Developments. It's pages 175 to 189, and the report is by Stephen McClure. Thank you, Stephen.
Hi, Convener. Hi, Jack.
Stephen, can you just hold on a minute? I'm not declaring an interest, but just to highlight that I bought the house 2 doors for this development. I don't know who is going to be the developer, but just to highlight to the committee that I built a house in that area, just so it's recorded. Convener, thank you.
Okay, can I just ask Jack, while I'm just reading through the report, if you could just circulate the photographs, if that's possible. I think there's 5 photos on the file, just to let the committee see that the actual site there as I'm going through the report.
Stephen, if you just hold on a minute, we're clarifying a legal point here. Thank you.
No problem.
Mr. Henderson.
Thank you, Convener, and I've noted Councillor Kerr's comments there. And it's for members to consider in any given situation, do they have an interest in the matter? And the first point is, do they have a connection to the proposed application in front of them? But I think what Councillor Kerr is saying, that he does believe he has a connection, but whether that then takes you to the next stage of consideration as to whether that would be an interest that would require him to declare an interest and also recuse himself from the meeting, having regard to the objective test, which is essentially what would the ordinary man in the street make of that connection. And I think what Councillor Kerr is saying is he's wanting to publicly declare the connection, but he doesn't consider, having regard to the objective test, that requires him to declare an interest or recuse himself from decision making on the item. Would that be fair comment, Councillor Kerr?
Exactly, Mr. Henderson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Stephen, if you just hold on for 2 or 3 minutes, because Robert Bissett has left the room for some urgent business, but he'll be back in a couple of minutes. So if you just hold on, thank you.
No problem.
Okay, Stephen, I'm just going to introduce this again. It's item 8, construction of 2 dwelling housing detached domestic garages at land to the south of 7 Blackberries Road, Falkirk, for Alchemy Development, pages 175 to 189, and Stephen McClure is going to introduce the report. Carry on, Stephen. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Convener. Okay, so the site is seen to be formed from a previous industrial site, which is located to the south of the village of California, just out with the village limit. To the north lie residential dwellings with Blackberries Road to the west. The remains of the site is surrounded by marshland and tree plantations. The site appears to have been raised to the road level and formed from a compacted surface with no permanent buildings currently on the site. The front of the site is separated from the road by an open ditch, and there is a grouping of small trees bushes along the rear of the ditch fronting the site there. The site is relatively flat and has been in limited use since the original industrial use ceased in the site. It has now been proposed to erect 2 detached dwellings on the site with detached garages and associated off-street parking and garden grounds. The reason it's been considered by committee today is that granting the plan application would be contrary to the development plan. There's quite a substantial site history, as can be seen in the report there. In terms of consultations, the Roads Development Unit had no objection to the proposal. Scottish Water had no objection to the proposal. Environmental Protection Unit had no objection, subject to a contaminated land assessment being carried out before any development is carried out on site there. The Coal Authority had no objection to the proposal, and the Flooding Unit as well had no objection to the proposal. In terms of Community Council, there was no comment from the Shield Hill California Community Council there, and public representation, there was no letters of objection or representation received. In terms of the local development plan, it'd be Falkirk Local Development Plan 2. The relevant policies there are PE1 placemaking, PE14 countryside, PE20 trees, woodland and hedgerows, HCO5 housing in the countryside, and IR13 low and zero carbon development. Out of the policies, all policies complied apart from HCO5 housing in the countryside, which does not accord with the proposal there. In terms of supplementary guidance, SGO1 development in the countryside was relevant, as well as SGO6 trees and development and SG14 renewable and low carbon energy. Again, SGO1 development in the countryside did not accord with the proposal there. Also relevant in this case was Scottish planning policy, which again, due to the restrictive approach within Scottish planning policy document of housing in the countryside, it was seen to not accord with the Scottish planning policy. Therefore, we looked at the additional considerations in this particular case on this site. As discussed within the report there are policy issues in relation to principal development within the countryside location as it sits just out with the village limit, although adjacent to the village limit. As such, material planning considerations are required, therefore to outweigh in terms of the local development plan to justify any granting of planning permission in this case. So given the site has been used for commercial purposes in the past, there is an existing vehicular access to the site. The site is also clearly defined and separate from the surrounding agricultural land, and given its size and location, it can be seen to have the character of residential plots there. The redevelopment of the site with 2 dwellings would replicate and maintain the character and settlement pattern of the development within the area and would allow for a more robust and defendable village limit to be established for California. The proposed dwelling houses in visual terms would follow the design of the adjacent dwellings at the site. It's also considered this with improvement on the more commercial appearance of the land at this site bounding the village currently. The proposed design and materials reflect the palette of materials used within the more recent additions to the village, ensuring the overall character and appearance reflects that of the location as well. It's considered redevelopment of the site with the new dwelling houses rather than a continued use of the site for any commercial purposes in the future with respect to the rural character of the area, as well as fit with the landscape setting and established development pattern of the area. The proposal would also be seen to achieve a design in keeping with the adjacent dwellings and have a high environmental standard. It is therefore considered from the matters noted above and the specifics of the location and history of this site that these would mitigate the impact of development in the rural area and outweigh the terms of the Falkirk Local Development Plan in this particular case. Therefore, in conclusion, the application has been assessed as noted to being currently contrary to the terms of Falkirk Local Development Plan 2 and Scottish Plan Policy. As such, material planning considerations are required to outweigh the terms of the local development plan as noted above there and justify granting of permission. In this particular case, given the specifics of this site and assessing the site, we therefore think that we would move to recommend planning permission be granted for the 2 properties in this case, subject to the conditions therefore noted in the report.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. Especially for new members, I think this is a really, really interesting one. We spoke a lot this morning about new housing in the countryside. We spoke a lot about the development plan, and it tells you quite clearly that granting this plan application would be contrary to the development plan. It also doesn't accord with housing in the countryside. It does not accord with the Scottish planning policy, but there are justifications given in mitigation circumstances where officers are recommending to grant. I think this is a prime example of every individual application is taken on its own merits, and there's got to be, especially housing in the countryside, there's got to be justification going against our own policies and also the Scottish planning policy. So therefore, in terms of the development itself, I'm quite happy to move the recommendations contained within. Thank you. And that will be minded to grant.
Thanks, convener. I think you're summing up there really was what I was thinking, and it's about the officer's view for each application, which is, I feel, the right road to go down. Because if we had it in black and white, we wouldn't need to be sitting here. So their views and recommendations on individual applications is very valued. And sometimes, as you say, the committee agree with it, sometimes they don't. As I say at the outset, I know the area very well, and I had the opportunity to build next door to that, which was a great opportunity for me. and you wouldn't believe how many folk stop at the welcome to the California and take a photo of it, because I used to see them from my sunroom. Anyway, I'm quite happy to second your motion, convener, as I feel that, as Stephen's already highlighted, this will just take it to the last area at that present site to clean up the area and bring the village limits to its last. Thank you, convener.
Okay, just to clarify, Councillor Bowes want in. Councillor Bowes.
Yeah, thanks, convener. It's obvious that this is a former industrial site in here, and to build a couple of houses on it has got to be a positive. That's why, and as the convener was talking about, there's got to be good reasons why we go against the planning rules and regulations. This one's probably one of the best reasons you can get. Some old industrial bit of land that's going to now come into a good purposeful use. I don't see any problem with this application at all.
Thanks for your input, sir. All inputs are valued. Okay, just to clarify, we've a motion moved and seconded to agree the recommendation contained within the report. Is anybody otherwise minded? We agreeing?
Agreed.
Great, thank you. Very much, everybody. That takes us now, as you know, item 9 has been continued. We decided that at the very beginning. That takes us to item 10, which is discharge of planning obligation attached to planning permission F90-0530, which restricts the occupancy of the dwelling house, now known as Forester's Cottage, Torwood, to a person employed in the management and supervision of a tree nursery operation at Torwood Nursery by Torwood Castle near Dunnipace at Forester's Cottage, Torwood, Larbert, for Mr and Mrs John and Dorothy Taylor. It's pages 219 to 226 on your agenda papers, and Catherine Chorley will introduce the report. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, convener. There's no detailed plans or photographs for the application as it relates to a discharge of a legal agreement. However, you can view the site area on page 226 of your agenda papers, and this reflects the location plan that was submitted with the application. The application includes a detached dwelling house located in the south of Torwood. Planning permission was granted for the house in 1990s and was subject to a Section 50 legal agreement. This is essentially an older version of what we now call a Section 75 planning obligation. With this case, the agreement was tied the occupancy of the dwelling house to the associated adjacent tree nursery business. The applicant now wishes to remove that tie, and as such, the application has been made to discharge the legal agreement. The standing orders require that it be determined by committee. There have been no representations or consultation responses on the application. There are no relevant local plan policies because it's a discharge application. However, there are a number of material considerations which are detailed on page 222. For the reasons set out in this section, it's our view that the legal agreement doesn't meet the current tests for a planning obligation, and the recommendation is that it be discharged. Thanks, convener.
Thanking you very much, Catherine. I'm quite happy to move the recommendation.
Happy second.
Thank you. Anybody otherwise minded? No? Okay then, thank you. So thanks to all members and officers. I think it's been a very, very beneficial meeting this morning, and especially for the likes of Gilston, which have been on these books for over 20 years. A decision has been finally taken, minded to grant. Other than that, I'd like to thank everybody and safe journey home. Thank you.
Thanks, convener.
Thank you, convener.